this panel, we're going to be discussing the latest study that Faunalytics put out, which I was the lead research on. And I'm really happy that we are joined by Akbar and Sophika, who will now introduce themselves.
Should I go first? Age before beauty. Okay. So hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Lovely to meet you for the first time, both Andrea and Akbar. And to the audience as well. Hello, I'm Sophika Kostyniuk, Managing Director at Aquatic Life Institute, where we focus all of our time and energy to reducing the suffering of the hundreds of billions of farmed aquatic animals in the global food system and trillions of aquatic animals that are caught in the wild and are in the global food system. My background, so Andrea, another point of connection between us. I am also a University of Guelph graduate. Crazy, go Griffins. From the ecology program. So my career has been absolutely non-linear. I've worked in the conservation field for the majority of my career, and prior to moving over into the animal advocacy space 3 years ago, 2021, I was working in the ocean conservation field for a few decades. So moving into the animal advocacy space without really knowing anyone or anything in terms of what resources are available to me, what are the norms and standards, and how does this entire ecosystem work? I was really fumbling around in the dark for the first while, I will say. So I'm particularly thrilled to be part of the conversation today, because studies like this one that Faunalytics has just put out is an incredible resource to people like myself and probably most everyone in the movement as well. So very grateful in advance for the conversation we're going to have.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophika. And hi, Andrea. Nice to see you again. So hi, everybody. My name is Akbar Ali. I am not a University of Guelph graduate. I am a graduate of Northwestern University in the States. I've worked in animal protection for about a decade, primarily in farm animal advocacy. I'm currently at APEX Advocacy, which is APEX. Advocacy stands for Animal Protection, Equality, Intersectionality. And essentially what we do is we try to inspire people of color to advocate for animals in however that best makes sense for them. We don't always ask them to join mainstream movement spaces because they can be kind of difficult for people of color and of other marginalized identities. So however they're able to incorporate advocating for animals in their lives, we help them do that. Previously, I worked with Mercy for Animals for 5 years in Los Angeles, and I also worked with another nonprofit called Logistically, and I've done some work with Legal Impact for Chickens. So, kind of all over the space. I'm currently in law school in Denver. And I'm here because they have an animal law program, which hopefully I will be able to use to help our beyond human relatives in the future. Yeah, and again, thank you, Faunalytics, for doing this amazing study. I'm sure it'll be of great value to everybody who comes across it. And it's definitely something that, even though I'm not somebody who's data-led, I'm very happy to see this kind of data compiled and put together and dispersed throughout the movement. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
And thank you both, especially for the kind words. So for the attendees for today's discussion, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the study, some key findings, and then we're going to dive into some Q&A. So for this study, I'm really proud to say it's the first kind in our movement, and it reports salaries in the movement in addition to investigating pay gaps. So to report salary percentiles in the US farmed animal protection movement, what we did was invite groups with a US office to submit salary information to us. So we reached out to executive directors or operation directors, and we asked them to basically confidentially upload a spreadsheet that had salaries and job titles for their organization. And it's really important. I'll make a note here that we never asked the employers to submit things like their employees' names or their demographic information. So the ED and the operations director, they also completed a short survey about their organization regarding things like revenue, mission, pay philosophy, and pay practices. So to help supplement our data, we ended up adding salary data from publicly available job boards. So in the end, we report salary percentiles based on 345 US jobs from 40 different organizations. And so, like I was saying, for confidentiality and privacy reasons, we didn't ask employers to submit demographic data to us regarding their employees. So, to look at pay gaps, what we did instead was we asked employers to distribute a survey on our behalf to their staff. And it was with this individual survey where we were able to ask staff to self-report their salary as well as details about their job, for example, like their job level, number of hours worked, as well as to self-report their demographics. So here we were able to ask people, do you identify as BIPOC? Do you identify as having a disability? Do you identify as being LGBTQTIA? So in the end, we surveyed 244 staff across the movements, with approximately two-thirds of these participants living in the US. So while the salary numbers in our report for the benchmarking portion is US specific, the pay gap analysis is not restricted to the US, but we did take into consideration country. So I'll just give some brief key findings that we found. So first, we did find that there are pay gaps in our movement. So a person who belongs to a marginalized community, so whether they identify as BIPOC, having a disability, or being LGBTQTIA, they make 85 cents per dollar that a non-marginalized person makes. And this is adjusted for things like age, country, years of experience, and job level. So, in other words, this pay gap isn't due to differences in job level or other employment factors, as we took that into consideration. So, that's one key finding. Similar to that, we did also find that 45% of marginalized participants said that they were somewhat or very likely to leave the movement if they were offered a similar role with better pay outside of the movement, compared to just 29% of non-marginalized participants. So that is the equity analysis. And now I'm just going to report some key findings based on like the salary percentiles. So again, based on 345 US jobs from 40 organizations, the median pay is around $80,000, with bigger organizations tending to pay more. So this just means that half of the salaries that were reported to us are under $80,000, and the other half is greater than that. For benefits and paid time off, this is based on 27 US participating organizations. We found that 78% offer a medical plan, 56% have dental benefits, 52% have a retirement plan, and 44% have vision care benefits. And all of these organizations offered at least 15 vacation days, and 84% offered at least 5 sick days. So those are the key findings. If you're interested in reading more about how we collected the data, as well as more results, and most importantly, we do have recommendations, not just for leadership, but also for funders. Really encourage them to check out the full report for that. But yeah, now I'm going to start the discussion with Akbar and Sophika. So I am curious for you two, how you'll be using these results.
Would you like to go first this time, Akbar?
You can go first, Sophika. It's totally fine.
Okay, I'll take a crack at it. So again, just the industry that I come from before this, which was ocean conservation, and I would say actually for most of my career, which has been a few decades long, salary information has been one of the most tightly guarded secrets and the thing of gossip everywhere across every organization, the thing of gossip and speculation and insecurity and frustration for not only myself, but also my peers. So I always support greater transparency for, just to do like ground truthing. So for that, I'm incredibly grateful for this to be circulating in our movement. We are a 5-year-old organization. Aquatic Life Institute was founded in 2019. And we grew really organically from the beginning. When I came on in 2021, we really didn't have much of an organizational structure around the really good work that was going on, because it was very campaign and programmatic focused, as opposed to the way that some other organizations start their journeys, which is really focusing on operations and strategic development and kind of building that foundation from which programs grow. So I think there's kind of two different ways to kind of enter into the space, but we kind of grew from the programs and then tried to build an organization around it, as I said. It wasn't until last year that it was brought to my attention, or maybe I finally had a bit of time to focus on it, that even our small organization of 9 team members and a few contractors had almost no consistency in terms of job classifications, understanding of pay bands. How do you move upwards through your pay bands and into a new job classification? What are kind of best practices and standards in this movement? And this year we started doing a really, really deep dive on all of those pieces. So I was extremely fortunate, and the organization was extremely fortunate last fall to receive an unexpected donation from a generous anonymous donor that allowed us to hire our very first operations lead. And my God, life has gotten so much better now that this individual is on board with us, because they have the expertise and the passion to invest in this critical work of the organizational infrastructure. And with that individual, as well as our amazing pro bono HR advisor, and we're working with Culture Canopy, cannot give them enough shout outs, really have helped guide us through this journey of like, how do we streamline our job classifications? What are the titles for those jobs? What are appropriate pay bands for those jobs? What is realistic for us right now, and what is aspirational for us? We're definitely not perfect. We'll never be perfect, but we are committed to continuous improvement year over year. Are we seeing big gaps somewhere? Are there blind spots for us? So really, I would have loved for this comprehensive report to come out in advance of that process, because that would have definitely helped inform us better. But what it has allowed us to do several months after kind of going into the first iteration of all that operational structuring is a reality check. How did we do? Where are we really missing the mark still? Where do we need to kind of buckle down and make significant improvements moving forward? And how are we kind of averaging out across the movement? So our organizational budget is just shy of 800,000 US this year. So we're kind of square in the middle of the two classifications of organizations that were evaluated in this report, because it was organizations with revenue of 1 million or greater and organizations with 1 million or less. But more like 500, 600,000. So we were kind of right in the middle, and I'm really, really pleased to say that we have done quite well. We're areas where I feel that we can improve further, certainly in our benefits and our total benefits offerings. And it's really interesting to see that those tricky and more expensive pieces of benefits, like dental and eye vision programs, are often the ones that are kind of the last to get added to the benefits programs. We're in a similar classification, but what we actually do is just have a general wellness benefit that is quite flexible and allows team members to kind of debit off of a pooled amount that they are issued at the start of every year. And we're super flexible with it. And that seems to work really well. But again, it's not perfect. As we grow and hopefully our revenue grows, we'll be able to enter into a more formal benefits plan that's fully comprehensive. For example, we have no retirement savings plan right now, and we're still figuring out what we do with parental leave. It's going to come up. It's going to come up soon. We don't know when or with who, but it's something that we're going to have to face. So we have to plan for that in advance. So this study has been really, really helpful to us. I think where it's also extremely helpful is not just for management and operations and foundations, but it's also helpful to individual staff members. Again, because it's somewhere that we can point them to if they feel that they're, frustrated or being left out, or, just whatever questions they have around it. This is a fantastic resource that we can walk through together and say, hey, these are the findings of X number of organizations across the US. And this is where things are shaking out right now. In order to advance, this is kind of the action plan that we need to put in place. We never want to lose great people over a few $1,000s. So this report also helps us understand, like, are we putting ourselves at risk? And is someone a flight risk because we didn't address their salary or benefits appropriately? I can
Thank you so much.
stop there for the time being.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that perspective and insight, Sophika, and for being so transparent about the changes you're making at your own organization. I do want to, thank you for mentioning the consultant that you went to, Culture Canopy. I'm going to put that in the chat for people who are curious, because this same person, Jay Barrett, also helped us with this project because he has the HR experience. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Akbar, I'm curious to know what your thoughts, anything you wanted to say to what Sophika said, or like your own thoughts about how you would use these results.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Andrea. So currently in the organization I'm with, we're like a small team of contractors. So this report isn't like necessarily pertinent to what like how our structure is currently. But in terms of like the movement writ large and kind of the advocates that we are working to bring into the space, which are people of color and people of marginalized backgrounds, this is certainly like very eye-opening, and it's I think something that confirms what a lot of us who have been in the space for a long time have felt and have known. And certainly when I was like at larger organizations with big budgets, they would do these kinds of things regularly. They would, do salary benchmarking and analyses, talk to various levels of staffers to see what was working and where they thought they should be, et cetera. And so I think even though the movement has, quote, professionalized over the last several years, it's still, I think, set up in a way that is reflective of a lot of the issues that occur in for-profit spaces, which is like what you would expect. A person who is of a marginalized background is probably going to make less than somebody who isn't. So it's not surprising in that sense, but it's something that we definitely want to relay to people who are considering working in the space or in any kind of social justice space, because as the report mentions, only 3% of donations go to animal rights and environmental causes combined, which is a very, very small number. And that's something that we need to be mindful of. Of course, we think our work is very important, but we have to pay people, and we can't pay people if we aren't, sustaining that level of revenue that comes into the movement. So that's something that I think the report is very useful in. I think also one thing that really kind of sticks in the back of my mind when I look at this kind of information is the idea of like how funders influence who gets paid and how they get paid. Because at least in my experience, there was like a very heavy focus in organizations I've been in where, there was a certain kind of advocacy that was deemed more essential or more important to be funded than the other kinds of departments or advocacy, which, kind of sustained and supplemented the advocacy that was being centered. So, for example, I would work on the operations side of things, and people who were in other departments, that were getting more funding, they would be able to add more staffers. And while their departments continued to grow and expand and do more important work, I was kind of left, at the same level, at the same bandwidth, having to support an increasing amount of people because the funding was specifically designated for that staff, for that kind of work. So I think it's important for people to understand that if you are going to donate to this space, that it needs to be spread out more equitably. It shouldn't be so kind of top heavy in certain spaces, even if those are more externally facing spaces, which can, of course, attract more donors. But internally, it can cause issues, which can, of course, cause turnover, cause burnout, cause compassion fatigue, cause all the things that make people leave the movement. And unfortunately, those kinds of things, it seems, are generally experienced by people of color, by women, by non-binary people, et cetera. And also, I would say that in my experience, people of marginalized backgrounds are also the ones who are like more likely to accept a lower paying position, and then also less likely to ask for a raise. Especially if it's in a space that's mission oriented, where you're constantly in service of the mission of the greater good. Then it becomes a thing where like, well, I don't want to ask for too much money because like, what if they can't afford it, or what if like, it feels like I'm being greedy or whatnot. So there are those things that kind of come into play, whereas other groups are less shy about asking for money. So there's that. And then the last thing I'll mention real quickly is I think one thing that a study like this I would like to see kind of incorporate going forward would be like, how does issues of pay equity across identities play into the resistance that the movement has toward labor unions? Because I think that is one way that we could really like have worker power restored in a way that gives them more autonomy, more agency in determining their own level of pay and in determining their benefits, in even determining like their kind of like co-ownership of the organization, like Food Empowerment Project, which like recently switched its kind of hierarchical model to one that's more horizontal. So those are things that are all, I think, really important and are especially important to people of color in the space or in any social justice space because there's so many aspects of advocacy and just work life which affect how you get compensated. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Akbar. You're giving me great ideas for future potential research projects at Faunalytics. Like I really like qualitative type of research. And like the last two things you were talking about, unionizing and going from hierarchical to de-hierarchical, I feel like it would be great topics for qualitative research. But yeah, we can look at the audience Q&A now. The first question is, was the pay gap for individuals from underrepresented communities controlled for the size of the organization? For example, I'm wondering if more BIPOC folks happen to work in smaller organizations, which you found to have lower salaries in general. Great question. So unfortunately, that was not a variable that I looked at in my model. I did look at organization revenue. I know it's not the same thing as organization size, but I do feel like they're highly correlated with higher revenue being a bigger organization in terms of staff size. Not sure if that assumption is 100% true, but this all goes to say that organization revenue was not a significant predictor in my pay gap analyses. But again, I know that's not the same as the question you're asking about size. So I did make a note of that because I still have the data. We are going to delete the data 6 months later just because of the sensitivity of it, but I am going to note that down. So thank you for asking that. The second question is, how do you think an advocate can use this report to advocate for higher pay on an individual level or themselves? So great question. In our report, we do have specific recommendations for individual advocates. So whether they are seeking employment or they're already employed in the movement. So one of those recommendations is basically going to your employer and asking them if they don't do so already, how is it that pay is determined at the organization? So it's just having that first discussion, if it's not already transparent with you and other staff members, just opening up that dialogue would be the first recommendation. But yeah, Thank you for that. And then the last question in the chat box is, did you examine a gender pay gap? We did. So we did look at men versus women, and we did pool non-binary participants with women. Pros and cons to that. I'll try to keep it short and simple, but we didn't want to exclude non-binary trans participants all the way, but we did pool them with women, and that pay gap was not statistically significant. But yeah, we did examine it, but it wasn't significant. Just to keep it short and sweet. Is there a third question? Yes. Okay. So this question is the feeling of donors about the importance of compensating employees fairly changing? Do Sophika or Akbar have any thoughts on that?
Um, it's a fantastic question. I would love to know the answer myself. What has tended to happen, I think, in all of our funding proposals except one in the time that I've been with Aquatic Life Institute, is we never obtain the full amount that we apply for. And very often, and this is actually something that I'm extremely grateful for most of the time, just receive unrestricted funds for, our overall programmatic work. So unfortunately, this is the unfortunate part. The lovely part is that it's unrestricted, so we can kind of apply it as we need throughout the organization, but we don't actually know what the expectation and feeling is of funders for specific line items, like this employee for this year delivering this output should be compensated this amount. And then, we receive funding for that. I definitely know that a few of the funders that we've been speaking with, this has been part of the conversation, that it is really expensive to pay US equivalent salaries, whether team members are in the States or outside of the States, but as a US based organization, we pay for now, and I think this is going to come and bite us sometime later as we start to grow, but we pay equally no matter where our staff are located, because our work presently is not place-based. You can work anywhere as long as it's compatible with US time zones, and you can move around throughout the year. So we definitely have had a few digital nomads on our team, and that's totally fine. We pay the same salary no matter where you're based. And it's really expensive. And I know certainly compared to some other organizations that we collaborate with, where they do have place-based employees in lower income countries, the difference is staggering. And it's also super challenging to try to keep up with their level of growth in terms of number of staff that they employ versus what we're able to do. I think that it's an ongoing conversation. I think the benefits piece is something that I would love funders to consider a lot more than I've seen them considering in the past. And it's not just salaries, but it's salaries and benefits, which adds on a huge, huge additional expense.
Thank you so much for that, Sophika. Akbar, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that. If not, that's fine.
I'll just add real quickly. At Apex, I don't necessarily deal with donors all like on a regular basis, but I believe most of the funds that we receive are unrestricted. Just kind of to like backtrack a little bit, I think in the past, what I've seen is a lot of the big donors in the space, especially, really want to fund things that are very data centric and that are measurable, that can show the what's it called, the ROI, so to speak. And I think while I understand that approach, I think just having that kind of narrow focus oftentimes results in people being overworked or unfairly compensated, or there being kind of like a heavy balance in one a direction over the other. So I think that's something that maybe fundraising teams and executive directors, they need to talk to donors about and make sure that they're aware that that approach has that downside. Because of course lived experiences cannot always be distilled into data, and it's important that people understand that, both inside and outside the organization. So that's all I would say there.
No, I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. Fifth question we have here is how can pay gap for individuals working in the same organization in different countries be addressed? I do wonder if something that Sophika was saying about how your organization pays the same, not the same, but like there's no region specific pay rate, basically. I wonder if that's one way to address it, but I would like to reiterate, I'm not an HR consultant, but I can direct you to an HR consultant who, if this is something you're thinking about for your own organization, something that you're struggling with, I definitely recommend going to Culture Canopy, who I believe we put their website in the chat box, because they are an HR consultant. So this is beyond my expertise per se. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that question, but if not, I'll go into our last question that is asking, did you delve into the benefits packages offered by various organizations in this study? Would love to see how we can advocate for better benefits organizationally. In a way, yes. So we don't have in our report like saying like these are the different packages offered by the organizations. We more so break it down by the benefits offered. So in our report, you can look at the number of participating organizations that offer different types of paid time off, as well as different types of benefits like remote work, flexibility when it comes to work hours, and also very specific medical type of benefits. So again, I was kind of breaking it down by dental, vision earlier. We also have the numbers of participating organizations that offer things like parental leave, mental health services, life insurance. So that's all in our report if you want to check it out. Yeah, and I believe those are all the questions that were asked. Thank you so much for asking those questions. And I want to thank again Akbar and Sophika for joining me today. This was really wonderful discussion. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, myself, feel free to email us. If Akbar or Sophika, you're comfortable with it, you can put your emails in the chat, or a resource for people to connect with you. But yeah, I also have office hours. So if you have a very specific question about our recommendations in this report, because I am the lead researcher, I am more than happy to talk to you about these questions you may have. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Thanks again.
Thank you. Lovely to meet both of you. And thanks to the audience for your interest in this issue. If you email me, just please be patient. My inbox is a scary place at times. Full disclosure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks all.
Bye.